Building comprehensive wealth is a journey that takes place over time. But let's ask ourselves the all important question: what do we really mean when we say wealth? Because if all we mean is money, then anyone can get rich. Just work 80 hours a week, find a roommate to do the same thing, share the expenses, live cheaply, and pile away all the excess until you're a millionaire. But if wealth is just the accumulation of money alone, rather than the power to enjoy it, then most people aren't willing to go the distance to achieve it. It's just not more important than our physical and mental health. Another proverb attributed to King Solomon comes from Ecclesiastes. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them, and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God, for he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. This makes the distinction for us. By implication, some may have wealth and possessions, but not the power to enjoy them. Or others may have the power to enjoy life, but without much in the way of possessions. But those who have the power to enjoy, with or without possessions, enters a state that in today's world is called the flow state. The flow state is a state of intense concentration, but not physically or mentally taxing. One often loses track of time in this flow state, and they feel that the activity they're performing is intrinsically enjoyable, that they would be performing it regardless of any future benefits. It's worth doing in and of itself, directing thoughts to the activity and away from the self. That may be why the final part of this proverb claims that such a one will not much remember the days of his life, having been kept occupied with joy in his heart. The flow state occupies someone with joy and fully absorbs their focus. So what does this have to do with making money? Every person has unique personality traits that are linked to a set of experiences and skills. The intersection at the center of personality, experience, and skill is where that person is likely to find their flow state. Discovering this center is key to breaking through to discover what thing that you were created to do. Now, this could change throughout your life. What I mean is it may change from time to time based on your strengthening of other non-core personality traits, accumulating new experiences, acquiring new skills along the way. But when you find this place, you immediately set yourself on track to accumulate wealth while also maintaining the power to enjoy it. I think there are several reasons why someone may feel unsatisfied with their day job. They might feel overqualified for the job they're doing. They feel that they have so much more to offer, but instead they're stuck doing menial tasks and dealing with problems that are uninteresting and unchallenging. They might feel that one skill of theirs is being worked to the max, while leaving other important skills almost completely unused. They might feel that they are an introvert in an extrovert's job, or an extrovert in an introvert's job. They might feel like a left-brain dominant individual trying to do right-brained tasks, or a right-brain dominant individual trying to do left-brain tasks. They might be employed at a workplace that operates in an overly specified way, taking division of labor to the extreme without allowing enough variety or autonomy to the employees to allow them to fully give everything they have to offer. This last point is particularly well addressed in the book Why We Work by Barry Schwartz. The fact has become apparent that we as humans work for much bigger reasons than just money. We need money to survive, of course, but once we have our basic lifestyle paid for, we start to realize more and more that how we work, the type of work that we do, means far more to us than simply what will bring home the biggest paycheck. I think a big reason why the movement to retire early has become so popular is that a type of race has developed to get out of the corporate workplace that values return to shareholders above all else. Here's the sad nature of this vicious cycle. The more that individuals work mainly for the paycheck, the more that companies are going to focus their efforts fully on rewarding their employees with money and money alone. And in order to reward them with money, they have to become as efficient as possible, like a machine, with a division of labor that strains out the multiplicity which is inherent in our desire to work. They pay us more because that's what we demand for early retirement. and we save that money to get away from our well-oiled machine employers as fast as possible. The odd thing is this: while we may be tolerating the unnecessary stress of a company trying to grow at, say, 20% per year, we as individuals don't have that same need when it comes to our own personal lives. Once we've hit a comfortable level with our salary, sure, it would be nice to grow that income at 20% per year, but what we're willing to give for it becomes less and less, because there are other things important to wealth than just more and more money. Our time, for example, our flexibility, and the purpose that we feel in the jobs that we perform. The ironic thing, though, is that once we hit upon that particular activity, role, or job that balances and merges our personality, experience, and skill set, we suddenly have the potential to become the best at what we do. And being the best at what we do, or among the best, suddenly raises our future financial potential dramatically. Not by focusing on the money per se, but by focusing on integrating our whole selves with our work. In his book, Why We Work, Barry Schwartz summarizes the work of psychologist Barbara Fredrickson, who made a very interesting observation about people who work for a higher purpose rather than strictly for money. I'll read a passage from the book. Paying attention to enhancing the character of work creates what we might call a virtuous cycle. When people find engagement and meaning in the work they do, it makes them happy to go to work. And as psychologist Barbara Fredrickson has shown, when people are happy, they work better and they work smarter. Much of Fredrickson's work is summarized in her book Positivity, and her central insight is that when people are in states of positive emotion, they think expansively and creatively. They are in what Fredrickson calls a broaden and build mode of engagement with the world. When people are in states of negative emotion, by contrast, they hunker down defensively, worried about making mistakes or going wrong. Danger gives us tunnel vision. But when we're not under threat and get satisfaction from the work we do, our positive emotional state will enable us to do better work, which in turn will create more positive emotion, which in turn will promote even better work, and so on. So while we can and will address the practical methods of building wealth in the future, this foundational idea of working with purpose is extremely important. Why? Because when you retire, whether early, late, or on time, you will face a reckoning when you have to determine what you're going to do with all your time. You may think you have an idea of what that time might be filled with now, but when it comes to it, and you actually are faced with the day-to-day realities of life without work, you will have to make some decisions about what you're going to do that is meaningful and puts you into that flow state. And very often, what you end up choosing to do in the end is valuable enough to actually be a job in itself, which means you could have acquired this lifestyle far earlier in life if you'd only known what you wanted. The famous economist John Maynard Keynes once predicted in 1930 that in about 100 years' time, which would be 2030, the economic problem would have been almost universally solved. Basically, that means that on average, most people would have enough money that they would be much more flexible to determine how much and what kind of work they perform. Now, while we can't say that this has been entirely true yet as of 2025, there has been some truth to it. You may not get it much from the media, but the world has actually significantly improved economically for the vast majority of people since that time. And he offers his opinion that by about 2030, for the first time in history, human beings will need to reassess real values of life so that we know how best to spend our time when we suddenly don't have any particular need to spend all our time working. He says, for many ages to come, the old Adam will be so strong in us that everybody will need to do some sort of work if he is to be contented. We shall do more things for ourselves than is usual with the rich today, only too glad to have small duties and tasks and routines. But beyond this, we shall endeavor to spread the bread thin on the butter, to make what work there is still to be done to be as widely shared as possible. 3-hour shifts or a 15-hour week may put off the problem for a great while, for 3 hours a day is quite enough to satisfy the old Adam in most of us. In other words, people love to work, It may be hard to recognize this if you're stuck in a job that runs counter to your personality, experience, skill set, and even values. But work is in our blood. When you step outside your immediate day-to-day environment, you're very likely to realize that you actually enjoy work if it were only the proper kind. You may just not have been exposed to it yet. Keynes refers here to Adam, the first man according to the biblical account in Genesis, whose primary commandment from God was, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. So even in paradise, the ancients believed work was the primary activity. But here's the important distinction. It was enjoyable work, not the kind that was overly taxing. The sweat of one's brow was considered a curse after paradise fell. Things became more difficult, but work in and of itself was part of what made paradise enjoyable. According to Solomon, there is nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. And so from some of the earliest sources up until Keynes, we see that work has continually been inherent in humankind's DNA, a love of creativity and expression which generates benefits to ourselves and the world around us. Here's the challenge though. Often, I think, in our younger years, we don't really know what exactly it is that we want. What we want immediately is the freedom to do whatever we've always wanted to do, whether that's travel the world, see new places, buy a nice car, get married, start a family, or become someone important in our work. And these are all great goals. In fact, that's how it should be. But what's interesting is that this takes us naturally on a progressive journey toward realizing greater parts of ourselves and the world around us, taking it all in and incorporating it into ourselves and our personality and allowing it to transform us and make us see the world in new ways. So in the beginning, I think it's often about creating freedom to buy and to do. And partially because of this, and partially because we're still young and a little bit inexperienced, we often are at the mercy of taking whatever job presents itself to us at the time, whether it's ideal or not, as long as it makes the money that we need. But over time, as we realize those goals, we also transform the way we think about money and time, and we suddenly develop a greater need to not just make money, but to actually achieve the ideal long-term lifestyle while making an impact on the world around us. That may be why Napoleon Hill, author of Think and Grow Rich, said, "The average man reaches the period of his greatest capacity to create between 40 and 60. These statements are based upon analysis of thousands of men and women who have been carefully observed. They should be encouraging to those who fail to arrive before the age of 40 and to those who become frightened at the approach of quote-unquote old age around the 40-year mark. The years between 40 and 50 are, as a rule, the most fruitful. Man should approach this age not with fear and trembling, but with hope and eager anticipation." Now, there are many possible reasons for why our greatest capacity as men and women comes to us in what might be considered mid-career. One is experience. The other, though, is a transformed mindset. What's interesting is that once you manage to accomplish those early goals, which you set as a young person, you suddenly have something new to live for. Not just the dreams of youth, but new dreams which present themselves to you over time. And suddenly, because you have achieved certain important goals, your willingness to take risks suddenly becomes greater. Why? Because the survival mode of life becomes inherently easier. You naturally have more power to demand higher wages or salaries simply because of the experience behind you. You become better at what you do. But then there comes a point when you realize that what you're doing for someone else, you could just as well do for yourself. What you're contributing to a company, you could just as well do for your own company or your own cause, over which you direct the control. And that tends to happen at different times for different people. But it's at this stage when you are faced with the decision. Do you have a dream job? Maybe you do. Not many people do. But they are out there, and some are fortunate enough and strategic enough to maneuver into the job which they deeply, truly enjoy. But if you do not have a dream job, there is another question you have to ask yourself. Is there a job out there you can imagine would be your dream job? Not because it's easy or because it's remote or because it's somehow less of a job, but because the purpose it serves aligns with your heart, your personality, experience, skill set, and values. If that job does not exist, or you're not aware of its existence, then it may be time to create your own job. And this can be done in a number of ways, but I teach the foundations of how you can develop your financial situation in such a way as to give you flexibility to start a business or to give yourself a raise through development of your own discretionary fund. You've heard it said that investing is a long-term game. Now, that's true if we're talking about retirement. And retirement is very important. I helped hundreds of clients across the US and the UK retire comfortably for over a decade. But I'm going to go against the grain here a little bit. Investing isn't just for the long term. There are ways to invest for the short term by hedging risk in various ways, which I teach in my courses and upcoming membership. And this can be done in such a way that strategically aligns you with your goals to achieve that dream job and lifestyle, whether that means you land the job at an employer or create your own job. But learning strategic financial and investment strategies is key to learning how to accomplish this without having to make big sacrifices of your time, flexibility, and feeling of purpose in exchange for money. If you're wondering about where to start when it comes to identifying that dream job in which you can enter your personal flow state, a great place to start is actually by taking one or two personality tests. I like the Enneagram and the Myers-Briggs specifically, but while personality tests can't tell you who you are and should not be used rigidly as a way to make excuses about weak spots or bad habits, they can be extremely useful in identifying certain job roles which match the personality that is unique to you. Especially knowing the result of two different personality tests can be useful to allow for the most specific identification of what makes you tick, what puts you in that flow state. And all you need to do once you know this is to place it into an AI model like ChatGPT, Gemini, or Grok. Tell it your personality results from each test and ask it for a list of job roles which are best for this personality type. With this list, you can really begin to think seriously and take aim at knowing where you want to steer your career from here. In summary, work is implicit in a life of comprehensive wealth. We may not even think of it as work. In the retirement years, this might look like volunteering, doing charity or mission work, or simply being a loving friend or family member. In our working age years, this can look very different for each person. But the great thing is that if we can awaken to that ideal state, which we may not even realize that we're seeking, then we can achieve the wealth of meaningful work very early on in life. And meaningful work only means we are likely to become experts at performing it, which usually leads to strong monetary benefit. For some, this will be more or less in terms of monetary benefit, but that's where investing helps to compound that wealth, no matter what our personal capacity is to earn it. We live in a world where all the tools are available to us. We just have to learn how to use them, and anything we set our minds to do, we can accomplish.